You know, everyone remembers the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, but did you remember the multiple spin-offs it had? Well, I do. And I remember the one that was the most popular, if you can even say it was popular, considering how long it lasts. And that was Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX, which seemed promising enough considering it was going to be that same Tony Hawk gameplay you loved except on bikes. However, there's a reason why these spin-offs stopped coming out, and I think the foundation was laid here. For today's episode of the JayBlast Network, we'll be taking a blast to the past to look back at Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX to see how the story of the Tony Hawk's Extreme Sports spin-off games started. Tune in or tune out. You're tuning in to the JayBlast Network. Oh yeah, welcome to the next level.
From the makers of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Nice score.
Nice entrance.
Comes the new Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. You can do all of Matt's signature moves, and then some. Choose from 8 BMX superstars. Ride vert, dirt, or street. Even build your own crazy freaking bike course.
Hey, Tony, they should make a game for you.
New Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. Rated E for everyone.
Activision. If you were growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, did you experience the extreme sports boom, more particularly in the video game space for today's video? Of course, I'm talking about the boom made with the Tony Hawk games. Seeing the success of the first Tony Hawk game, Activision went to work hopping on this subgenre and went to find other extreme sports. Now you gotta understand, back then there were competitions for sports games. EA had the NFL, NBA, FIFA, MLB, and NHL licenses, and many more for different variations of sports. You had Sega, who had a history with licensed sports titles, making a comeback with its 2K series right now. And you know, back then 2K was involved with other sports besides just basketball. And then you had Sony trying to compete with EA on their own system with their sports line, and the other companies with sports games. These types of games may seem like something to pass on every year, but sports games are the sleeper hits of game sales. Yeah, everyone talks about it at release and then kind of plays the game in the background silently, but they are one of the highest selling games and they sell consoles. My point in saying this is that Activision now had a piece of that pie, except now it was with extreme sports games, which didn't have a lot of competition, or more specifically for back then, it didn't have a lot of good competition. Seeing this opportunity, Activision would try to hop on the BMX train next and get Matt Hoffman to lead the next game. Now, even if you weren't into extreme sports, you probably knew who Matt Hoffman was. Not only was he a BMX legend, but he would appear sometimes in TV shows. My favorite being his appearance in Ned Declassified. I know that was a little later on from this game's release, but still, it was awesome to see. Safe to say he was the right guy for this game. And also Dave Mirra had his own game out at the time, so they needed somebody else just as popular or even more popular to compete with that. Activision would hire Shava Games to rework the Pro Skater 1 engine to work with the new BMX gameplay. Now, why the Pro Skater 1 engine and not 2's engine at that point, considering this game came out in 2001? Well, that's because they were trying to put the game out a year before, in 2000 and not in 2001, which was its actual release date. Yeah, they tried to hop on that wave really fast, but the game had to be delayed and released in 2001, with many players experiencing it for the first time with the demo in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Yeah, remember when games used to come with demos and previews for other games coming out? I miss those days. But did it live up to the brand new hype at the time from Tony Hawk? Well, it's a bit complicated. Hi, my name is Jay, and you're tuning in to the JayBlast Network. Let's take a blast to the past and hit the bike pedal as fast as we can to look back at Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. Now for this video, I'll be mainly playing the PlayStation version of the game. There was a Dreamcast version released way after its official ended production in the States, which is pretty crazy because there wasn't even an N64 port at that point. But I'm only going to be looking at the PlayStation version, and I'll be looking at the handheld version later on, so stay tuned for that. A note on the Dreamcast version though is that the graphics are better, but they also changed some of the lighting in the environments. They get a different feel, so if you wanted to play the Dreamcast version, you would get a somewhat different experience. Now to the gameplay. If you play Pro Skater, then you will be able to familiarize yourself with the controls. The major difference here is that you're on a bike, not a skateboard. And yes, that does change the dynamics of the gameplay. Bikes are much wider and can go on dirt and land, and can go backwards when landing from a trick, and still do tricks while backwards. The bigger player model will throw you off at first when timing jumps, but eventually you'll get used to it. The problems that I have with this game is the grinding and the manual. Now the manual more so is annoying, as you see for whatever reason they changed these up from the Pro Skater series. Now I went back and played Pro Skater 2 just to check if I was the one that was messing up, and no, as you see here, I'm doing manuals just fine. And I swear I'm inputting the button the exact way as Pro Skater 2 version, but then I realized that's not how it works in this game. You see, the manual has to be inputted just like you would input a special trick. And what I've noticed for some combos online is that the game really only allows you to manual once through a combo. Quick editor's note here for the manual. I did end up using the manual more than once in the combo when I had cheats on, but that was also with cheats on. So I don't really know what the correct answer is, and nobody really talks about this game because they're either obsessed with the other game or don't even care if the game exists. It seems like you're given a better opportunity when you get the special meter, but I still just don't think they're worth it. It feels like you waste time trying to perform it, and it's just a nasty input in the combo. And I see people get high scores on the maps, they're usually going up to a ramp and doing some vert tricks, just like you would in the first Tony Hawk. And I apologize, guys, I don't really like doing this with the game, you know, just ignoring a mechanic or trying to say the mechanic is bad or anything like that. I just don't know why the manuals were done this way, and I can only assume it was done this way because they were adding it to the Pro Skater 1 engine compared to the upgraded Pro Skater 2 engine, and that caused these issues. Also, the grinding has no meter, just like in Pro Skater 1, but the manual has a meter here. What sense does that make? Make them both have a meter. There are also 3 types of biking represented here: street, vert, and dirt. The first 2 are similar to Tony Hawk, but dirt is giving you the ability to ride in dirt and grass areas, which usually have large hills to trick off of. It's really cool to see they tried to reference multiple biking styles in this game, though I think it's more important to hold the jump button in this game while moving than it is in Pro Skater 1, since you get more speed while doing it. However, the issue with the controls come up when the missions come up and some of the levels.
Oh, I can see them run by the town.
When I said the game is like Pro Skater 1, I really meant it. It's back to 5 goals, 2 score goals, trick letters instead of skate, and a secret tape, and some random goal. Though the secret tape is not a secret tape. It's instead a magazine cover, which was a reference to all the magazine covers Matt Hoffman was in at the time. A pretty cool replacement. Now back to the bike itself, it really changed the perspective of the game. I felt more free on a board, but a bike requires more space to turn. You can't play the exact same way as before. You can get your bearings with this in the Hoffman factory level, the warehouse of the game, which is also in the demo for Pro Skater 2. Though it does have an outside area that you can unlock, making it kind of like the hangar for Pro Skater 2, a mix between the warehouse and the hangar, a mix between both styles of Pro Skater 1 and 2, just like in the game's engine. That's pretty neat, isn't it? Also, another thing similar to Pro Skater 1 is how you unlock stats in the game. You don't buy your individual stats like in Pro Skater 2. Instead, it's tied to the bike upgrades that you're going to get, which themselves can be adjusted by adjusting the equipment on the bike. Similar to Pro Skater 1, except in that game, your stats increased as you completed more missions and unlocked more decks by its own. Whereas in this game, you unlock bikes with fixed stats that you can adjust slightly by changing the equipment. And you want to make sure you do change the bike as soon as you're able to get it, because man, those later missions, as you're about to see, are kind of rough. I felt the level was a good introduction to get used to those mechanics, but the problems start to show in the game once you reach the construction yard, the second level. I really feel like this is where the level design issues start to come into play, and it's mostly tied to the missions. I feel like they designed these levels looking at the Tony Hawk levels rather than something for BMX, because I feel like the problems here wouldn't be an issue if you use a skateboard. Of course, the terrain would need to change, but the design here feels better for a board and not a bike. It's with the way the level was elevated. You can ride down the hill or jump off, and going down eats a lot of time. Plus, getting a high score here is a pain in the ass. That's probably the most frustrating part of the game depending on the level. Part of the reason for this sucks is how the manuals work, as I mentioned before. So if you're trying to score that way, it's kind of pointless unless you really master how to use it. Meaning you're going to be relying a lot more on vert and your special tricks, which because it's like Pro Skater Skater 1 means that every trick you do and is repeated loses points. So you have to keep using more tricks, except the score requirements in this game are more akin to Pro Skater 2 than Pro Skater 1. Do you see the problem that's going to start occurring here? I'll say this though on Construction Yard, that big jump you do that you can go on the construction equipment from is really cool, and it's probably the biggest highlight of the level. It's just too bad the rest of the level kind of stinks. Now London Underground, however, represents some of the best of the game's levels, being more of a vert based level with lots of downhills and ramps to jump off of. Hell, it's essentially a downhill level like in the first Pro Skater game. Everything is set up to flow with the mega jumps here, and it's real easy to get a 6 score, and it's just in general fun to trick around this level and find new lines to create because of it. It's probably one of the best downhill levels in the Tony Hawk franchise and spin-off series all together. Then you get the Blue Torch competition, which is similar in that it's a lot of mega jumps and it's a very big area. And this is where I really started to have fun with the game, because the game became a lot more engaging. The maps were big, there was lots of grind on, there were lots of hills. It felt like this was made for the bike in a giant open area, and the map just looks really cool. Right? They made this look really pretty. It made me want to experiment with the combos and tricks more, and we needed more maps like these two. You know, there were areas for all types of biking in these maps, especially with Blue Torch, and that's the type of design that we really needed to be catered to, not just made for one. And unfortunately, the next map, New York City Park, has that problem, and well, kind of has more problems. If you played this level in the free ride, it's honestly not bad, but its goals are completely scattered and completely trash. Despite all of the grindable areas, the best place to get up and score is this one half pipe in the middle of the map that can have this asshat in his cart run over you out of nowhere. I mean, the place feels realistic and it looks really nice, but there isn't much to trick off of that's going to give you a high score. And there are some cool unique setups and areas like this grindable tree where you get the secret magazine from, and the hockey rink. I mean, there's a lot of memorable stuff here, but with the way this game is, it just ends up being just pretty visuals to a otherwise poorly designed level for a game like this, especially with the way the manual works. It ends up being one of the worst levels in the career. Now, I want to state I do not mind difficulty, but when it comes to levels like these, it feels like it's some of the worst elements from the worst of the Tony Hawk levels. Like how in Philly and 2, it's really only viable for scoring in the skate park area of this giant map, which had to be unlocked, by the way. Scoring really is the hardest part of the game, as getting the collectibles aren't as hard at all. That design still matters, especially when you have single sessions and free skates and you built this whole player ecosystem around getting high scores in the game. And it's not like they never understood this, because there are levels that really excel at this, like the next one, Treatment Plant. If you aren't biking down the hill here, you're hopping in and out of the numerous pools around the map. It even has some street and dirt areas, giving something for every type of player, and it's one of the best levels in the game because of it. And also, I want to point out here, the score is higher than the last level. It's still pretty hard to get the score in this level, but it's more fun to try to achieve because level design opens up more opportunities for it. And that's where the game shines. And I also know something else while playing this level. I feel like Matt Hoffman isn't even the best biker in this game. Hell, he may be one of the worst, because I was having a hard time scoring with him in most of the levels with his specials. But then when I played Rick Thorne, getting his scores up was much easier thanks to his special moves. In fact, when I see playthroughs of the game, I see most people use him, so I must not be alone in this. It's not like the special moves give more points or anything than Matt Hoffman, it's just that they're easier to combo with compared to Matt Hoffman. So if you're playing this game, maybe you want to play as Rick Thorne first. Also, I knew him because he appeared in Tony Hawk's American Wasteland, so that's also a bonus. But then we go back to the poor design, and even double down on it at times, with Le Harbor, California. And good God, does this level represent all the issues in this game. You know, I've been sitting on this for a minute, but I think I've nailed down the issue. As I said earlier, this game was made on the Pro Skater 1 engine. However, it clearly wanted to add Pro Skater 2 mechanics like the manuals, and clearly some of the design feels more like it was made for Pro Skater than Pro BMX. This level shows all of that. All of the random ramps in the road. The buildings are a pain to give up on. And then once you get there, it's not even worth scoring for. Just a bunch of real life environments with no clear design direction for biking. And the fact that once again, the best scoring spot, and really the only scoring spot that will get you high scores, is a quarter pipe in the back of the map when the map is huge as fuck, is another problem. They wanted one's goals format, but two's goal requirements in the score. At least Pro Skater 1 didn't try to force you to score super high with its limited mechanics mechanics. Plus the fact that moves add less score even outside of repeating them in a combo doesn't help. This is just poor design. It affects the different collectibles too in this level, by the way. Like there just isn't a flow at all in how they're collected like there usually is, especially in the Tony Hawk games. And I'm not trying to make this video just a Tony Hawk comparison, but since this is the spin-off of the Tony Hawk games, I mean, people are gonna make that comparison regardless. Thankfully, the last level, CFB competition, is amazing, having areas again for all 3 types of BMX styles. You see a pattern here and just giving you a lot to trick off of. It's just too bad that it takes almost completing the entire game to get to it. You need almost every magazine, so you might as well just 100% the game at that point. You also need to score pretty high and not bail nearly, if any, if you want the gold medal in this level. But with all the styles present, it feels like a true test of your skills. And I'm glad the game ended on this high note, but the road to get there was frustrating. There are little things here and there that make the campaign stand out from Tony Hawk, besides some of the goal differences on your first playthrough. Every level, for instance, has a video to go along with it, and it feels like the bikers are going on this journey with you, with each video representing the level you were about to enter. Most of these were based on real locations, and like I said, outside of a certain mission, well, outside of Lake Harbor itself, I think these levels are fun to ride your bike in, so that's a plus. However, there was one thing I noticed about the levels compared to the Tony Hawk levels, it's that there just isn't a lot, if any, secret areas in the game. I tried looking some up, but there really isn't any. Like, there's no secrets kind of look forward to. There are big maps at times, but there's not really anything extra to look for. If there was, I really would have pointed it out, which kind of holds the levels back compared to the great design of the Tony Hawk levels. But with that middling campaign out of the way, what do you get once you beat the campaign? Well, you get Tony Hawk, or as my friend says, a man that resembles Tony Hawk. Because what in the hell did they put on this man's head? Dude has BMX versions of his own moves, which is really cool. He also comes with the Warehouse and Burnside from Pro Skater 1, which are unlocked by completing more campaigns, which while feeling a bit off with the BMX style, still are cool extras to tie it back to its predecessor. There's also one more secret skater, which is the Granny? Huh? Yeah, that ain't no granny if I ever seen it. This is unlocked in a weird way. If you keep restarting your runs and level multiple times, then all of a sudden she'll appear having had enough of you sucking at the game. Damn, my bad, old lady. If you just play a full 2-minute time with her, you can unlock her, and yes, she has some granny themed specials. She even gets her own video when completing her campaign, where you can still tell it's one of the BMXers, probably Matt himself, in the granny costume. It's kind of endearing. And when you get all the Bikers magazines, you'll get the Bikers Max Bike, which has max stats for you to use. Definitely helps in the end. Of course, there are videos of every pro when you beat their campaign, just like in the Pro Skater games, and they are just as cool to watch. The only issue I have is that when you free ride the levels, they are all tied to a Bikers campaign. So if you haven't progressed with them, you can't play the level unless you play the campaign with that biker, which sucks. But you can always use cheats, and they didn't hold back. You can add more time to a run, like up to 8 minutes per cheat entry. The grind meter itself, for some reason, is a cheat code, and extra points, infinite specials, perfect balance, just like in the Pro Skater games, can be accessed. The weirdest one here though is Exorcist mode, which makes your biker turn green and makes your head turn like your biker is possessed. Someone must have seen too many horror movies on the dev team. To cap all that off, you have create a part, but not create a player. The system works just like it does in Pro Skater 2, which is awesome. You can make better maps than some of the ones in the game already, or just make some bullshit. I highlight all these features to show that while it did not match the hype of Pro Skater 2, Showa Games really did try to make these games feel as feature rich as the Pro Skater games. I think the only mode here that should have been added was a creative player mode, since all the Tony Hawk games going forward had it. And of course, I couldn't forget talking about the soundtrack. Now, they kept this soundtrack as good as any Tony Hawk game, with some bangers from Jurassic 5, Great Expectations, Hip Hop from Static X, Everything Turns Gray, which I think appeared in another Tony Hawk game, but I'm not too sure about that, and Icons, and many more. This soundtrack is amazing to listen to. There's not really a song here that I think was bad or didn't fit the theme of the game. Activision always killed it with the soundtrack. Now, before we wrap up, let's take a look at the handheld versions of this game. The handheld versions of Pro BMX are interesting. Because of the weird timing of Pro BMX release, it manages to be one of the last games for the Game Boy Colors and one of the first games for the Game Boy Advance. Both play a bit similar. The GBC version operates on this lane system where you can only switch by going up a ramp and turning. It's not that hard to do tricks either, but sometimes it's hard for me to tell how high I am from a ramp. This time your objectives are all based in separate levels with time limits instead of being on one single level, which I like because of the control scheme. It helps with completing the objectives for this type of game. There's even some exclusive levels here like the Rotterdam Dam and the old jail yard, but with the way the progression stages work and the controls, I don't think it's as big of a deal as you think it might be. All these levels operate on the lane system, and it's just ramps, rails, and half pipes that make up these levels, which is a part of the gameplay. But I mean, nothing is really done with them in relation to that level, like grinding the tower in the construction yard level. Again though, because this is the Game Boy Color, I'm not asking for much, and the gameplay is decent for the system it was on. Now the Game Boy Advance is almost the same, but you get a little bit more control with you being able to change direction without just being tied to a lane. However, turning is kind of finicky, and that's my biggest issue with the GBA version. If you turn from a ramp, it's easier, but even with more control, it's hard to get around the map, and I find myself fighting with the controls more than getting around when I need to find collecting objectives. It's easier to trick here than it is in the GBC version, and that part of the game is pretty fun. Most levels return for the GBA version, except, you know, they're different because it's on this system. Only Blue Torch and La Cabra were cut, and honestly, I'm not mad about the latter. My next issue though is a time limit. This one has all the goals on one run, and they decided to add 10 goals to this version. So the only version that has 10 goals akin to Pro Skater 2 is the GBA version, but instead of 2 minutes, you get 1 minute and 30 seconds. Why? Why make it shorter with these controls? I don't know, man, that's just ridiculous. On the contrary, competitions are tied to its own mode in every level with its own progression, so you get to pick how you want to play the game, and if you just want to trick around and get rewarded for it, now go with the competitions. Also, both games have these really in-depth tutorials showing you how to trick on ramps, unboxes, pretty much everything in the game, showing you the movement and the specials. It's amazing to me they added this in the game, considering that it was a tail end of the time where most games like this got away with dropping the controls to a manual instead of using the space for it in the game, especially when it came to fighting games. You can spend a lot of time here just training, and they made it fun just to learn the game. The objectives here can be frustrating at times, but just tricking around the map works well. Seems to be a pattern here compared to the console version. I think these versions have some cool additions to check out, but honestly, I'd rather have Tony Hawk on all of these systems than just this. It's not the movement, it's the main campaign, but I feel like it has the opposite problem of the console version, where the other objectives are annoying because of the controls and the scoring ones are the fun goals. If you still got a Game Boy Color or Advance working, or have it modded or, you know, emulate, I would check it out for the hell of it. But it's not something I plan on returning to like I returned to the handheld versions of its main counterpart, that being the Tony Hawk games.
That was too soft.
The impact of this game is a little strange, as it's technically the start of the only somewhat successful spin-off sport to the Tony Hawk series, but I feel the first game is often forgotten because of the second game, even though this game had a demo in Pro Skater 2. I just think this is because of not only the late release on the Dreamcast and PS1, but also the fact that the game is tied down, in my opinion, to trying to be like Tony Hawk with bikes, instead of taking good elements from Tony Hawk games and making a BMX game from that. I mean, the mechanics are a weird mix of 1 and 2 while running on one's engine, and though I've seen people score high, I think most of the levels don't really encourage that with their design. They can be fun to just run through, but the score, I mean, it's like we got some of the worst of Tony Hawk Pro Skater's levels at times. And with the more stiff control scheme, it just makes the game feel like a lesser product rather than standing out from its predecessor. You know, I even went and played Dave Mirra just to see if I was crazy or BMX games just had a bad rep on the PS1, but Dave Mirra played better while copying the formula of Tony Hawk. The objectives work in steps. The physics feel more made for the bike than Matt Hoffman's game, and the levels are huge and give good amount of space for tricks. Also, it has ragdoll physics, which is always a win. Look, I'll save Dave Mirra for its own video, but I just point this out to say that it can be done well on the PS1 and was done well. It's obvious the game went through some development problems as it was delayed to 2001 when it was going to be released in 2000s, but I feel at this point this game would have been better off served reworked for the next generation of the system at the time. But at the same time, that was what the sequel was for, which is already in development. But I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I felt this game would go from okay to mediocre at times. And even when I had fun, I was hit by something stupid in the campaign. But I will say it again, just exploring levels on the bike is fun, and it's just too bad that most of the gameplay is tied to the campaign. I mean, you don't even unlock free bike on a stage for every character until you unlock it for that specific character. That is freaking ridiculous, and something that is available in Pro Skater. And no, I'm not playing the game again. I'm done playing this trash. This bad foundation, in my opinion, was the start of the death of Activision expansion into other extreme sports, like EA did with its other sports games. However, EA doesn't make Madden a half-ass NBA Live. No, they make them right for the different sports they represent. And I feel like the game has it down and how it represents the pros and the videos. It feels like a fan project as you progress. I just don't think the developers or the pros tried to half-ass this, but it just comes down to being a weaker version of its predecessor because of its issues. And when you're just a weaker version of your predecessor, then no one's going to play you, and they're just going to play the predecessor, which is why I feel like this game in many ways is kind of lost to time compared to not only its sequel, which I have fond memories of, but also the Tony Hawk franchise, when it should be able to stand on its own, and it could have led to a long running franchise with the BMX games. However, as we'll see in the future of BMX in terms of video games was not good, and maybe it was all in the foundation, or maybe it was just the future titles had issues. We'll have to see. But in terms of this game, I don't think I'll find myself playing it again anytime soon. Maybe one stream so you all can laugh at me and my gameplay, but I just did not have that much fun really diving into the game like I did the Pro Skater series. And that makes me sad because I was hyped to play this and make a video about it. Hopefully the sequel does better, because I remember it being a way better game than this, which could be a good thing. But when your foundation is not good to start with, you only set yourself up for failure even if you make something great out of it. So don't expect that same magic that you found with the first Pro Skater game to come through with this game. But also, fun fact, Matt Hoffman actually was the first to land a 900 trick for BMX before Tony Hawk did. Yeah, he landed it all the way back in 1989. Isn't that crazy? But Tony Hawk was the first to beat him to a video game. I guess that's not as much of an accomplishment in the extreme sports world, but hey, his series did last longer than Matt's. That being said, this is the JayBlast Network signing out. And don't forget, you better believe, baby. Yeah.